it is to the neighboring structures, these houses all around, which are tightly packed into this neighborhood in East Lansdowne along Lewis Avenue. Not just along Lewis Avenue, but the homes on the backside. The desire here is obviously safety first, but obviously as soon as they can get in and try to extinguish these flames, try to protect these homes nearby and other people who perhaps may not have been evacuated while this all unfolded, they're just chomping at the bit to get in there as quickly as they can.
Yeah, we've been saying it must be tremendously frustrating to watch this home going up in flames. Hopefully they have been able to or will be able to access that 11-year-old gunshot victim who was the reason police initially responded here to this home. The address 58 Lewis Avenue in East Lansdowne, Delaware County. They were on the scene shortly before 4 o'clock when the gunshot started coming from this house. You heard that eyewitness say he heard a pop, 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 and then he saw an officer with what appeared to be maybe a hand wound. We saw a video of another officer who looked like maybe an injury to the leg. We know at least one of those officers was shot, but you are looking live here now as this home, in the aftermath of that police response upon learning an 11-year-old was shot inside this house, now this home going up in flames and quite rapidly, making it even more difficult to access the scene there for those first responders.
Yeah, and I think as we look at video from a short time ago and you see what the house used to be, you realize that in the span of 22 or perhaps 24 minutes, it is all but gone now. The walls, the exterior walls remain, but everything on the inside is all but gone right now in just an incredibly intense fire. Again, we don't yet know what started it, but as soon as those officers arrived on the scene in response to the reports of that child shot, they were met by gunfire themselves, immediately retreated. And you see the officers here from several minutes ago behind their own vehicles. This is not a live image right now, but that there is the house. What it used to look like, and by used to, I mean as many as 7 minutes ago, it was heavy smoke, gave way to heavy flames, and now the upper floors of that home are completely missing. One can only surmise the condition of whomever was left inside that home.
Also important to note, our Maggie Kent on the scene there at Penn Presbyterian Hospital, where I believe at least one of the officers was taken. They are both conscious and alert, is the way she put it. Conscious and alert.
Okay, I think we just have been informed that Becca Hendrickson, am I right? Becca Hendrickson has now arrived on the scene. She is on Lewis Avenue. Becca, on the ground, what are you seeing from your vantage point?
Brian, this is a tense situation. A lot of neighbors out here as we watch this fire burn behind me. I've just learned from sources that fire started about 15 minutes after police got here. I want to step out of the way from Lewis Avenue to show you what's going on. We can see that smoke billowing into the air. We've seen police departments from pretty much every borough, every town in Delaware County pulling up here to assist. What I've learned from sources is that an 11-year-old, a young child we're hearing was shot inside the house. Officers came out to report to that, and I'm told by sources that as soon as they got to the scene here, they started taking on fire. Sources tell me at that point that the suspect retreated back into the house, and about 15 minutes later is when this fire started. Since that original gunfire, where we're told 2 officers were shot and taken to Penn Presbyterian. We're told there haven't been any other shots since then. Those 2 officers in the hospital now. I'm told the district attorney is heading to the hospital as well, and it appears that both had some sort of leg wound that's being treated, but both are conscious and alert. Here on the scene live, you can see again just how intense this fire is, this billowing smoke, all of that fire coming out of the house. And again, so many people out here in the neighborhood. Some of them heard those shots. We are hoping to learn more information soon. But again, at this point, we know from sources that 2 officers were shot, one from Lansdowne Police, one from East Lansdowne Police. And at this point, we're told that no other people have come out of the house, but that original call that they came out for was for a child shot in the house. And we're going to work to bring you more information, but for now, here live in East Lansdowne, Becca Hendrickson, Channel 6 Action News. Brian?
Bit of new information there, too, in terms of where those officers came from, what departments. Becca, as we continue to stay with your shot right now, we can see that you're roughly a block or so away from that home. Can you give us the sense of what's happening around you, or who's gathered there? Is it neighbors, witnesses? What's going on around you?
Brian, it's a lot of interested people who are coming out here to the scene here. A lot of them just wanting to know what's going on. As I said, there are police departments from pretty much every town in Delaware County who are coming out here to assist. They have this whole street blocked off. Like you said, we're probably about a block away from where this fire is. I can tell you the police barricades go another 2 blocks past that. So a lot of these neighbors out here obviously trying to figure out what's going on. And just as we've been here, we've seen so many more police officers, again, anywhere from Radnor Police, Haverford Police, everyone around there coming screaming out to the scene. We're also seeing, of course, fire trucks that are coming here as well. Again, this fire is still burning. It doesn't appear to me that they're dumping any water on it at this point. It's still burning quite extremely.
Yeah, and we're looking at the same shot here from the air, Becca, and they have no water on this yet. And they've obviously made a conscious decision not to put those firefighters in harm's way with whatever threat may remain at this point inside their home, inside that home. But of course, the question now turns to, can they mitigate any further damage to the structures around this house?
Yeah, they haven't been able to move in at this point. So this fire just devastating, ravaging this home here in East Lansdowne. Again, we did learn the 2 officers shot were from Lansdowne Police and East Lansdowne, but they are conscious and alert and at the hospital right now receiving treatment. But you're looking live here as this situation is unfolding here in Delaware County. It all began with officers arriving on the report of an 11-year-old shot inside of this home. As Becca just told us, the gunman retreated into the house, and within about 10 to 15 minutes, the officers there on the ground did begin to see smoke and now these flames engulfing this house. We did see as they were trying to make entry into the house, we'll have to see how that unfolded and if they were able to access the interior of the home. But at the moment, they must not feel that the threat is completely subdued, as they're not allowing fire crews closer to this scene here. But this is a highly populated area here in Delaware County. We're looking live here from the ground. People from probably a long distance can see this smoke now rising into the air as we wait to see how this situation will ultimately be resolved.
Yeah, I think we're all struck by the intensity of that fire. It's evident in one way from our vantage point in the sky when you see it on the ground and how high those flames are licking above those homes, the intensity of the smoke. It is no question that people have come out to figure out just what is happening if they've not been watching on their television. And that smoke, that thick black smoke billowing high into the sky there is not much left at this point, Sarah, of that home. It was a 3-story structure, attic, 2nd floor, 1st floor, porch. Last time we saw it from the air, the attic, 2nd floor, and porch were all gone. The porch is where the tactical team, the SWAT team, did attempt to make entry a short time ago. Not clear at this point what they hope to achieve by doing that. If perhaps they thought they had some intelligence that maybe someone might have been inside that porch structure on the front of the home. But again, this is the live look from the air now as this home disappears before our eyes. And the question about that child, the 11-year-old child to whom they responded, the child who may have been shot inside that home, we do not have reporting at this point that officers were able to get that child out. And so we surmise at this point that that child may well be inside that home at this point with whomever began the threat in the first place.
And Brian, you've been saying if we look at the top left sort of the screen there, you can see some of the embers there. There must be concern about surrounding homes as well, as they've not been able to move fire equipment in to try to put out this fire. So those surrounding homes, you can see the flames there up on the corner or the side of your screen. They're now possibly threatening those nearby homes as well. We want to get to Action News reporter Maggie Kent. She's at Penn Presbyterian Hospital, where I believe, Maggie, are both officers there?
Both officers, as far as I understand, have been transported here, Sarah. And what we're looking at now is the emergency department. We just had Philadelphia Police directing traffic here because they had a Haverford Township Police Department vehicle as well as an Upper Darby Police Department vehicle come in. And it looks like they brought some civilians into the front of this hospital at the ambulance entrance. I'm not exactly sure who they were, potentially family members of the officers who may have been injured here. But what I can tell you about those officers injured is that we are told that both officers who initially arrived on the scene to this call for a child that was shot and injured were immediately met by gunfire, that both of those officers who were hurt arrived here at Penn Presbyterian, and they were conscious and they were alert and they were aware of what is going on. As of right now, this area is completely locked down with Philadelphia police. We have University of Pennsylvania police officers, and of course now some of those boroughs that are coming in to help assist. We have Haverford, we have Upper Darby. So they're directing traffic here. They want to keep this area locked down just in case there are any additional people who are injured that need to arrive here to Penn Presbyterian. But as I mentioned, it looked like some civilians just came in the ambulance entrance. Not sure exactly who they were, potentially people who know these two officers who were injured. But again, they are alert and aware as far as we understand at this time. We're live at Penn Presbyterian. Maggie Kent, Channel 6 Action News. Guys?
Yeah, and Maggie, forgive me if I'm repeating anything you said. We're taking in information from quite a few sources right now, including our producers down the hall. But we have confirmed that those two officers injured, one from Lansdowne, the other from East Lansdowne. And while Maggie was talking, we got reporting from the ground that the back of this home has now collapsed. You can see the roof is gone. And in fact, as we watch live, we're seeing the upper floor, the walls here begin to cave in. But the back portion that you cannot see, because it is engulfed in flames, our reporter on the ground, Becca Hendrickson, telling us that is gone.
And notably here as well, they are finally getting water on this structure for the first time. You can see that they are down at the bottom of your screen, so they must have assurances that the active shooter threat has been subdued at this point. This is the first time they've been able to get any fire equipment close to this in about 40 minutes that this structure has been burning, this single-family home here in East Lansdowne. Becca Hendrickson is just about a block away from where this is unfolding. She's got a really good vantage point. Becca, what can you see from where you're standing?
Sarah, as you just said, we've just learned that the back of the house has collapsed due to those heavy flames. I want to give you a look behind me because, as you mentioned just a minute ago, we just saw fire crews start to dump water on this house. It's been burning, as you said, for about 40 minutes or so, and you can see that smoke billowing out of there, the flames shooting through the roof. And I do have to mention, there is fear that there are people inside of this house. As I said a little bit earlier, I'm told from sources that the police officers who came here for reports of that child shot, they were fired upon as soon as they got here. And those two officers, who we're told are conscious and alert, did see the suspect retreat into the house. Now, there has been no gunfire as far as we know since those initial shots fired, but officers also have not seen anyone else come out of the house. So again, there is fear. There are people inside as we're watching these fire crews really start to dump water on these flames and try to tame this fire, which is, of course, not only a threat to this house, as the back of the house has collapsed at this point, but really a threat to this entire neighborhood. Standing back here about a block away, we can see just, this billowing smoke. We can smell some of it. And of course, there are other houses in this neighborhood, too. So crews are working hard here to try to make this situation safer at this point.
Yeah, Becca, a couple things there. One, you're absolutely right to point out the fact that we just don't know who's inside that house. We've been reporting about the child. We've been reporting about the gunman who police say they did see retreat back inside the home. That's not to say there might not be other people who were inside the house at the time. So that obviously a major factor. But also, as we were watching this, it strikes me that the first hose on that home is coming from some distance away. And so even while they are probably safe to presume at this point that any threat inside might have been neutralized by virtue of the fire, they are spraying this from some distance away so as to not put firefighters in needless risk, in harm's way, should for some reason that active shooter inside that home have found a safe spot to hide.
I'm also curious to know.
Yeah, Brian, we're just not sure where any of the people are, if anyone is in this house, or where they could be at this point. But from what you're seeing, we're seeing it looks like one hose that's really starting to spray this massive fire. The efforts, of course, in order to get this out are going to have to be greater than that. But
Correct.
there is the safety concern here as well with a fire this big and the smoke really billowing into the air that I'm sure can be seen from not only this block away, but probably this entire neighborhood,
Yeah,
too.
you're right, Becca. One hose on that fire is a literal drop in the bucket, but they're doing what they can right now, mindful of the safety of all the first responders who are on that scene because they have to be there.
Becca, you can learn a lot, I know, on the scene by the body language of the law enforcement around you. In any way, do they feel like they've relaxed at any point, in any way, so that they could move this fire equipment in, or is this still a very, very tense situation there on the ground?
Sarah, from where I am about a block away, we are seeing a lot of officers who are hanging back here a little bit more, some of them chatting with each other. It looks like some of them figuring out how they're going to be able to get more people in there. The other side of this police tape, the closer you get, from where I can see about a block away, things do appear to be a little more tense up there. I can tell you from where we are, we haven't seen a new crew or a new piece of equipment come in a little bit of time, but that's also because this entire block is jam-packed with police cars coming all the way back here to the tape. It doesn't look like, unless they start to maneuver around some of these vehicles, get them out of the way, that they're going to be able to bring more pieces of equipment in. I am seeing a truck on the next block over there that has another hose attached to it. I can't tell for sure if that's the one that's being fed all the way to the fire or if that's a secondary piece of equipment. We'll try to learn more about that, but
Yeah,
it's going to be difficult to bring more pieces of equipment in.
No doubt, just a logistical nightmare down there too. But if we can, be grateful for anything here in this situation is that there is no wind today, and so as we look at these flames, they are straight up in the air. That smoke is straight up in the air, and those homes, which are just feet away on either side, do not appear to have been damaged just yet by those flames, despite the fact that they're just enormously intense.
Our John Paul also there on the scene. He's been talking to some of the people who live there in that neighborhood and heard the initial gunshots that came before these flames broke out. John, what are they able to tell you? What are you learning there on the ground?
I mean, it sounded like a lot of shots were fired, Sarah. I mean, people just kept saying they kept hearing shot after shot after shot. And now we're getting debris falling on us, the ash from that fire. You can kind of see it here coming down. This is how close we are to that fire. The firefighters are still on this side being held back, but they're starting to put apparatus in place so they can move in. But yeah, you can see some of that debris, that ash falling down. Now, I just talked to one neighbor who lives right next door to that house and heard the gunfire, and he knows those neighbors. He said he heard 1 or 2 shots, then he waited, and then he started hearing multiple shots. So he got down on the floor. Eventually, SWAT team came and got him out of that house. He's still wrapped in a blanket. He just walked out of the scene. I talked to another neighbor who said after she started hearing the gunshots, she ran to one of the stores here, and they pulled her inside and they locked up to try to keep her safe because nobody really knew what was going on. They just kept hearing the gunfire and seeing the officers coming here to this area and run toward that house. So that's just kind of the picture everybody is painting for me. Multiple gunshots, and then they saw the officers, and one of the neighbors said he saw the officers returning fire toward that house. And of course, another neighbor saying they saw at least 2 officers with wounds being taken away from the scene. If you guys have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Well,
but you can see these firefighters still waiting.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about
Brian?
the really important piece of information you relayed, as we were so curious about the people in those neighboring homes so close to that gunfire and those flames. We thought, did police have time to get them out? You're learning at least the next door neighbor was evacuated to safety. Have you heard anybody in the other nearby homes having been evacuated as well?
This is one neighbor I talked to. You can see he's wrapped up in a blanket. He obviously seems kind of like he's in shock right now. He's trying to call people. Yes, and I did talk to some other people. Brian, what one neighbor told me was after he heard the shots, he looked outside and saw officers running, and they were saying active shooter, get inside your house. So that's what he did. He locked himself inside, but eventually he just wanted to see what was actually going on and decided to leave that area. I only know of one person being helped out by the SWAT team so far, but I'm assuming we might see more, because I have seen some people walking out of that crime scene. There's crime scene tape up here, so I'm assuming anybody coming out of there is likely a neighbor who's been either helped out or forced out of their homes, because this is just not a safe area. In fact, I was talking to the firefighters, and they said that's the reason they're staging over here. Before they can get over there, all they have is their firefighting equipment. They're not equipped to deal with gunfire or anything like that. So you can see they've got their gurneys ready to go. We've got ambulances waiting. They're just basically, you know, what a juxtaposition when you see this. You see all the firefighters and you see this house burning in the background, and they're standing here basically helpless. They have not been given the all clear to go and help out and fight that. So they just have to wait here until they're cleared to go through, Brian.
Yeah. I think also interesting is the fact that John has just reported for the first time that it appears that officers did return fire. So when they arrived at this home for reports of a child shot, it was our understanding that they came under fire immediately. We had not yet learned until you just pointed out that they appear to have returned fire before retreating themselves.
Yeah, John, this all began with that 11-year-old being shot. That was why the officers responded in the first place. I know that it is an evolving situation. They're somewhat chaotic. Any sense of what has happened in regard to that 11-year-old?
You know, I did ask several neighbors if they knew the family and whether or not they knew the child that apparently was shot, and no one seemed to know. They said they knew the family, but they didn't seem to know about this 11-year-old. Now, they did say there's a lot of kids in this neighborhood. In fact, I saw a family a little bit earlier. They had a little girl there. Looks like she just got off the bus. So this seems like a family neighborhood. But no one knew that 11-year-old. And the return fire from officers, that came from the next door neighbor. He told me that he saw the officers firing back, Brian, because I know you had seized on that tidbit that I had gotten relayed to me from the neighbor.
Hey, John, quick question for you. We're now, as we hear from you, we're looking at the vantage point from our helicopter. It appears to us as though perhaps the home on the right is now smoking. Maybe the home on the left may also be smoking. Those homes may now be involved in this fire themselves. Are you getting any intelligence on the ground from those firefighters who believe those neighboring structures may now be compromised as well?
So I'll tell you this, Brian, we were all talking about that. I was gathered with some of the neighbors here, and that is exactly the concern that we had as this thing burns. And these houses, while they're not really close together, it doesn't take much, especially with that kind of heat pouring off that house, to go ahead and catch these. And I'm being hit with embers where I'm standing. And I know that that is a concern. And when we were talking about that, a few firefighters looked our way and they were nodding as well, as if they were in agreement that that is going to be another possibility. We just heard some sort of sound come from that area just now.
Well,
not sure what that was.
John, I think some of the cars there in the driveway are now on fire, so you're likely hearing maybe some explosions coming from those vehicles.
Yeah, it sounded like a boom or something.
Yeah, I would imagine. We can see that the car on the left, and there's a car in the rear of the house as well that also appear to be on fire. Police, they're still on the scene. This is not a resolved situation at the moment. This did all begin as they responded to reports of an 11-year-old child shot inside this home. Officers immediately came under fire. 2 were shot. They are alert and conscious at Penn Presbyterian at the moment. One East Lansdowne officer, the other a Lansdowne police officer. They did see a shooter retreat into the home, and then minutes later, this all unfolding now. Just about 45 minutes to an hour ago, first we saw the smoke and then the flames coming from that house as they attempt to get some sort of fire apparatus near this house to try to extinguish the flames that do now appear to be spreading possibly to adjacent homes and to cars there in that area. But other good news, we did learn that SWAT was able to get into some of those homes and get neighbors, those immediate neighbors, out to safety. But people just ran into stores shut down, people ran into their houses, locked up the doors because nobody really knew what was happening.
Well, as we're looking live now, we see a second hose has now been turned on. This one appears to be manually operated. There's a firefighter who's now spraying water. Seconds ago on the first floor, he's now dousing the second story of the structure. It's obviously beyond saving at this point, but I do think it's worth underlining the fact that that police have not yet cleared this scene, despite the fact that this home is destroyed. One can surmise that anybody who was inside sadly did not survive. Police have not yet taken that step to do so, and we do see officers keeping their distance right now. We do see firefighters still being held at bay. So until they get that all clear, which may not come anytime soon, that's going to remain the fact. So these two hoses are now trained on that home, trying to reduce the damage to nearby structures. But as we just talked about, it does appear now the home on the left and the home on the right are now also on fire as a result of this.
We do have some sound now with some of the neighbors there in that area. These are the people who witnessed this as it began, heard multiple gunshots. Let's listen to what they have to say about what they saw and what they heard.
Heard a lot of gunshots as I just came from the store. And then I smelled the smoke like 10 minutes later, and I just seen cops and from everywhere, coming from I'm running in their vest and everything.
Did you hear any yelling? Did you hear?
I heard yelling, active shooter, get in the house, barricade, don't come out.
That's what the cops were saying?
Active shooter, get in the house.
Yeah, so that's what neighbors are telling our reporters there on the scenes. Really a frightening situation. 4 o'clock on the afternoon on a Wednesday with kids would have been coming home from school at the time as this all began.
Yeah, I just want to point out body language too. Sarah, you asked John or Becca to talk about body language of officers on the scene. We did just see one officer walk somewhat casually in front of this home. Moments ago, they were barricaded behind cars. Their guns were trained on this home. It would appear, if we're reading into their body language, that they think whatever threat was inside that home is now gone. They are now walking around. Officers, in fact, firefighters have now approached this home within feet to spray water on it and reduce any more collateral damage from this absolute chaos unfolding in East Lansdowne this afternoon. Becca Hendrickson on the ground once again. She's been talking to neighbors, surveying this, her vantage point. Becca, what's the latest there?
Brian, we actually just got moved back about a block because of the danger of this fire as it continues to burn. Again, there's been a lot of neighbors coming out, obviously a heavy police presence here. And as they're starting to fight this, they wanted to move us back a little further. You can still see, of course, how dangerous this fire is and why they made that decision. And, you know, as I'm talking, police are putting up this new tape to keep us back even further. Again, we don't know who is in the house at this point, though, but we do see, I do see in the distance that they're spraying this house a little bit more, it looks like, than they were before starting to fight this fire. And of course, fire crews out here dumping water on it at this point. Some of the police cars are backing up as well. Them obviously trying to keep people safe as this threat of the massive fire continues.
What keeps going through my head as I listen to you and as I watch this scene is that neighbor that was pulled out of his home by SWAT officers and was standing just feet from John Paul, still wrapped in a blanket, the only thing he had when he was taken out of his home. And he's now watching from a block away as his home is now presumably on fire as well. And I do think we have John with us. And John, have you had an opportunity to speak to him in the last few moments?
No, he walked off. I don't know if he's being debriefed. I'm not exactly sure, but you know they've been kind of moving their apparatus around. They've been kind of clearing this intersection out so they can get their large vehicles in and out. I mean, we're in a narrow area, but you did talk about body language. All right, we're actually seeing firefighters walking toward the scene. This is the first time we have seen this yet since this fire started. They're starting to walk toward the scene. But as for body language, we saw some more SWAT officers walk that way, but they were walking. When we first got here, everyone was running and yelling and pushing people out of the way. That is not the case now. So they may have been given the all clear. I mean, if they're going into the zone right there. But if we look to the right, Jackie, you can still see there's a whole another group of firefighters waiting to be given the all clear as well. So they can go in there and they can fight this fire that appears to be spreading to the houses on either side. I mentioned they've been moving things around. This ambulance is coming in now to our right, so we might have to back out of the way. Very active scene. But a lot of it seems to be a hurry up and wait at this point with the firefighters. Brian, Sarah.
Yeah, and we can tell this is a Crozier ambulance here, just first responders coming from all across the Delaware Valley when they heard that these two officers, a Lansdowne officer and an East Lansdowne officer, had both been shot. I would imagine, John, they're all still there waiting to see how this gets resolved.
They are. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing officers and firefighters from all over Delaware County. They've been moving their vehicles out of the way, but on the way here, we couldn't believe the number of departments from all over Delaware County that had descended here on the scene, and they're now kind of securing the scene, keeping people back away from the area. This is, again, as close as we can get to what is going on there. And I have not seen any other neighbors coming out from that scene. It's maybe been 10 minutes. Now we're starting to see some water dripping down the street coming toward us. You can see that. So they are using their water. They are trying to apparently to get this fire put out. We're going to probably have to move out of the way as well as it's starting to come our way. But yeah, so they are now actively fighting the fire. And another thing you can look at is the smoke color. You see how it's kind of changing the color? It was thick black. Now it's starting to become like a yellow, whitish. That's a sign that they are dousing it with water and trying to put it out. In fact, the smell of this fire has changed a little bit. And if you've ever been to a fire scene, you know that smell when they are fighting it, that wet, smoky smell. And that's what we're smelling here about a half block away from it.
Yeah, that smell sticks with you, and it's going to hang heavy over that neighborhood for quite some time. But this is still a job in front of them, not just the hoses that are on the front of this house. We can't see at this point if they've been able to approach it from the backside, the rear of that structure having collapsed. We just can't see right now if there are any additional hoses on there. But I think it's worth mentioning. I mean, we've got an army of officers from a number of different police departments on the scene, as well as fire departments. Just because some are waiting on the corner doesn't mean that they're not being helpful. It is that simply there is a process here. Someone takes charge, there's a staging center, and then they're told, okay, you guys go do this, now you guys go do that. They got to wait for the order. And to that end, John, we've just gotten word that at least one of the police chiefs is now at Penn Presbyterian Hospital. They're going to give a statement fairly shortly. A live look there as soon as the chief steps to the microphone to give us any kind of update with respect to those two officers injured. We will, of course, bring that to you live. But we've not seen this picture in some time, and obviously this has been a hub of activity as well.
Yeah, this is where these two officers were transported, a Lansdowne officer, an East Lansdowne officer. Both were told with gunshot wounds, but alert and seem to be stable at the moment, which is the good news here, as they were transported to what is the major trauma center there in that area. And as always happens, police officers respond there to the emergency room as well to support their colleague as this, to make sure that they are okay. We also believe perhaps family is there at the emergency room after hearing this news that two officers were shot this afternoon as we come up on the 5 o'clock hour. Again, this was a situation where police responded to an 11-year-old shot inside a home in East Lansdowne. They immediately came under fire. They fired back. They saw the shooter go back into a home there, and then shortly after, that home was set ablaze. Smoke began coming from the rooftop, and the firefighters were just not able to get close because of the active shooter situation. So this is about the first time we've seen hoses within about the last 10 minutes be able to get some water on this structure, and this will be just the beginning for the investigation as they now look into why this happened, what happened, what does that scene look like, and there'll be a long investigation undoubtedly.
Yeah, we now have one fire truck which has arrived directly in front of that home. Obviously this has been the goal for some time, try to get equipment as close as they can. They've not been able to do that. Now they have one in place. They are moving ladders and more hoses into place. But as Sarah points out, there are some major questions that remain unanswered and will be the focus of a lot of investigation over the hours and the days to come. Chiefly, why was that child shot inside that home? Is by some grace, by some miracle, is there any chance that that child was pulled to safety and has been given any kind of medical treatment? We just don't know that at this point. What precipitated the shooting? What caused the fire? What came of the active shooter inside that house? And was there anybody else in that house at the time? All questions we simply don't have answers to at this moment, but certainly top of mind for officers as they now turn from what was Very dangerous active shooter situation into the next phase of this investigation, chiefly getting the fire under control and starting to figure out just what happened.
And not to mention, Brian, the trauma to this neighborhood here in Delaware County. This is a neighborhood impacted, and here we have more officials arriving here at Penn Presbyterian Hospital, where those 2 officers were transported for treatment. We do know this is 2 departments, East Lansdowne and Lansdowne. We do know at least 1 police chief is there on the scene as they come to check on these officers, who are alert and doing okay. We understand at the moment they're conscious as they are treated for gunshot wounds.
Yeah. I'll take a live look one more time here as we're very active on the ground. This is John Paul's camera right now, and those officers that were, rather those fire crews that were staging just feet to his right have now begun to make their way towards that house. John, what are you being told there?
Yeah, so they haven't said anything, but it looks like they've been given the all clear. They all started going just in the last 15, 20 seconds. And we know that they are fighting this fire. It looks like they're making good progress of it because it's getting really smoky down low. You can see that white haze now. That is the fire being put out essentially right now as more crews are starting to walk their way toward this fire. It doesn't look like we have a fire truck here close to us on the left. It looks like they're going to try and get some hoses out of it right now. I don't know if they're going to start hooking up and dragging them down there. That's quite a ways to go, but I know they have some long hoses. But yeah, they are starting to put this fire out. There's a lot of water pouring down the street toward us as we're watching these firefighters who've been staged here for what, almost an hour now, waiting to go in there and fight this fire and to essentially now keep it from spreading to the other homes any more than it already has. Brian, Sarah.
Yeah, John, obviously still an active situation. Sarah and I have been with you for the better part of the last 56 minutes or so. We're going to continue keeping our eyes and our cameras trained on the situation, but we're going to switch out anchor teams here. You're going to have Rick and Shari with you in just a moment. In the meantime, we are going to send things to Maggie Kent on the ground to give us the latest from what she's learning there at the hospital. Maggie.
Well, Brian, I can tell you here at Penn Presbyterian, things have quieted down, which is a good sign right now. But I have just seen Superintendent Bernhardt from Upper Darby Police and the 2 police chiefs, one from Lansdowne, one from East Lansdowne. They just walked in to the emergency department door, and that's the main door that we've been focused on since learning about this shooting just before 4 p.m. What we saw, those people coming through this door, Philadelphia police officers, officers from Upper Darby, officers from Havertown, family members of the officers who were shot in this incident or injured in this incident. We know 2 police officers, one from Lansdowne, one from East Lansdowne, were both transported here to Penn Presbyterian Hospital in West Philadelphia. I can tell you the scene here has been locked down with police officers. They want to ensure that everyone can make it here to this trauma center as quickly as possible so that they're able to see their family members, their loved ones, their fellow brothers and sisters in blue and make sure everything's okay. Now, as far as I know, those 2 officers who were injured are both alert and aware of what's going on. They were conscious as they arrived here to the hospital. I'm told that just before 4 p.m., they arrived to the scene there in Lansdowne, and what they encountered, what they were arriving to, was a call for a young girl who was shot inside of a home. And when they did arrive to that scene, they were immediately met with gunfire. That gunfire striking at least one of those officers, 2 of them being transported here to Penn Presbyterian. And you can see the droves of police officers who are all here coming out to support and show their consideration and their care for their fellow officers. And of course, the medical teams, they were at the ready here at the ambulance entrance just in case there were any other emergency victims that needed to come to Penn Presbyterian. They were at the ready. They were waiting, standing by. Thankfully, we haven't seen anyone else being transported here from this scene in Lansdowne, which is good news. Again, what I'm told is they got to the scene just before 4 p.m., a report of a young girl who was shot, and were immediately met with gunfire. Those 2 officers were rushed here to Penn Presbyterian Hospital. and of course treated at this level 1 trauma center. It's unfortunate, but we've been here before as members of law enforcement have been injured at the line of duty. Again, as I'm told, those 2 officers, now both their police chiefs inside, checking in with them, making sure that they're okay, or at least getting some update and consoling their family members who have also arrived here now. We're expecting to hopefully hear from those police chiefs about how these officers are doing, how they're doing physically, and of course how their spirits are, but mostly our thoughts are with their families and them right now as they're hospitalized after this shooting. We're live here at Penn Presbyterian. Rick, Shari?
Okay, Maggie Kent, thank you so much.
Thank you, Maggie.
It's now Action News at 5. Shari Williams alongside Rick Williams. Of course, we are continuing our coverage on the breaking news that is gripping the Delaware Valley right now for just over an hour and 10 minutes now. That involving 2 officers injured who were responding to a shooting in East Lansdowne just before 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, to set the scene for you, this was this house, which used to be a house actually, was 58 Lewis Avenue in East Lansdowne, Delaware County. Smoke continuing to billow from the remains of this home. As we saw just over an hour ago, when we first come on the air, the house was fully engulfed in flames. As police were arriving, various law enforcement units from throughout the county arriving along with fire crews, but they could not tackle the flames because there was word of a active shooter inside that house. 2 officers injured. They are now being hospitalized at Penn Presbyterian Hospital. We'll go there live in just a moment. But again, it has been a very fluid scene for just over an hour now here in Delaware County. We continue to try to piece together exactly what happened and answer some of the questions that have been unfolding throughout the afternoon.
We do know that this all started with a call for help, a response to a child being shot inside of a home. We're told when officers arrived, that's when they took on fire, and at this point 2 officers are being treated for their injuries at Penn Presbyterian Hospital.
Yeah, we're still trying to learn the status of the 11-year-old child inside that house who we're told is injured or suffered an injury. We're going to get the very latest now. Action News reporter John Paul, who is live at the scene, has been there since 4 o'clock. And John, what's the very latest at this hour?
Well, Rick, I'm right at the corner of Baltimore and Lewis Avenue. If you look past me here, this is where the situation unfolded, just about maybe a half block to a block down that way. The smoke has turned to a whiter color and is getting lower, which means that they are making progress. It's getting more choking. Like you can really smell it where I'm standing right now. They're pouring water on this. They just let the firefighters go in the last 5 to 10 minutes to start really battling this fire. And it looks like they have a ladder truck out there, and looks like they're spraying water on it right now, trying to get this fire put out. But it does look like they have this scene secure. When I had talked to the firefighters earlier, they told me they could not go in there until they were given the all clear. That came a few minutes ago. That's when we saw them all walk down the street and they started fighting this fire. We have seen SWAT team members down there as well, but they have just slowly been walking there. So it looks like they have this situation under control right now. I had been talking to neighbors here who had heard the rapid gunfire come from that home. I talked to one neighbor who saw officers return fire after that they saw those initial shots and heard those initial shots. Other neighbors ran for cover. They said officers were yelling active shooter, telling them to go into their home. One neighbor hid in a neighboring business that locked up the doors to try to protect everyone inside. They didn't know what was going on other than they heard the gunshots and heard officers yelling active shooter. Another neighbor saw at least 2 officers being taken away in ambulances, and that brings us to where we are now. After that house caught fire, they had to let it burn. They would not let the firefighters in there, so it really did burn to the ground and started to spread to the other homes. And that's what they're trying to prevent, this fire from spreading any further. Obviously, they can't save the house that was burning, but they can prevent it from spreading anymore. We're seeing the water just rushing down this street now, going into this storm drain that I'm standing right by. And that is the latest that we have right now. Rick, Shar, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those for you.
Yeah, well, John, it was quite the scene when we saw the firefighters who were actually being held back in a staging area and then finally getting that opportunity to get closer to the threat. Usually firefighters, they rush to the scene to get to work right away. Not the case this time.
Yeah, I mean, they almost looked anxious to go. I mean, they had to sit there and watch. they're trained to go in and knock these flames down. They weren't allowed to do that. They had to stay here until they were given the all clear. It just wasn't safe for them to go. They didn't know the situation. The only people going down there were fully armed SWAT teams. They were armored trucks going down that way, police officers. They weren't letting the firefighters or the medics down that way. I did see one medic, though, with the bulletproof vest who went down that way. But, yeah, they had to sit there and watch as this thing burned and spread, Shari.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just not what we see. This obviously is very far from the type of 911 call that we are accustomed to covering for this neighborhood right now.
Right.
So much happening for those who are in this zone of where the breaking news is happening. And to know that they were trying to alert neighbors, John, with active shooter for those neighbors.
Yeah.
All right, well, John, stand by. All right, stand by, John. We want to go to Becca Henderson, who's also at the scene, to give us the latest from where she is from her vantage point. Becca, you've been there for about an hour now. What else has transpired since you've been there?
Rick, a lot has changed in the past hour since we've been here. We're on the other side of Lewis from where John Paul is, it seems. And I want to show you my vantage point of this smoke that is constantly changing colors as firefighters are continuing to fight this. It's been a lot of developments over this past little over an hour since the first call came out. That first call, again, of course, police officers were called. East Lansdowne and Lansdowne police were called for reports of an 11-year-old child who was shot further down on Lewis Avenue. I'm told that as soon as they got to the scene here, that they were fired upon, and 2 officers were shot and taken to Penn Presbyterian. Since that initial shooting happened, though, just after 3:50 p.m., again, I'm told there had been no other shots other than that, but that suspect did retreat into the house. So over the last hour or so, as firefighters were not, of course, pouring water on those flames at first, they were assessing the threat. We've seen police officers and first responders from pretty much every borough in town in Delaware County who have been here assisting in this fire. And just in the past couple minutes, they've really been able to start fighting this, I should say, as the smoke has drastically changed colors. The back of the house had collapsed at points. There were cars on fires, and it appears some other structures were beginning to put on fire as well. As this fire has increased in intensity, and we can see just that billowing smoke, we were pushed back for our own safety. And a lot of the neighbors in the area, as you can imagine, if you lived here, everyone was out of their houses trying to figure out what's going on. So a lot of this scene, too, has been police and first responders doing crowd control, making sure that everyone could be safe in this situation.
Yeah, Becca, as we continue to look from some of the chopper video at the scene, you mentioned the neighbors, and we were wondering throughout the afternoon, had there been some type of shelter-in-place order, because this is a relatively quiet residential area that certainly exploded into chaos and drama. What have the neighbors have been telling you that they've heard from law enforcement as whether they should stay home, stay inside? You've obviously been talking to some neighbors who've come outside to try and investigate exactly what's going on along their street.
Rick, a lot of those neighbors have been outside, but law enforcement have been trying to push them further and further back from the scene, of course, for their own safety. I do know that a couple people were trying to get out of the area that police were in. You know, they have different appointments throughout the day, stuff like that. But while they couldn't leave the scene, they could walk out of here. Police trying to keep people as far back as possible.
All right, Becca, thank you.
All right, we want to go now to Action News reporter John Paul, who is there being joined by the district attorney there on the scene with you.
Right.
John, what can you tell us?
Yeah. Sorry, Rick. The district attorney, Jack Solstheimer, agreed to talk to us about what he knows. What can you tell us about the situation that unfolded here?
Sure. 2 officers were responding to an emergency call this afternoon, a 911 call about an 11-year-old possibly being shot at the property we're at right now. They responded, and they immediately took gunfire from the house. Somebody shot at them. 2 officers had been injured. My understanding is they are going to be okay. They're in stable condition, but we're saying our prayers for them right now. Everybody in Delaware County should be praying for these 2 officers who ran towards fire when everybody else can run away from it. As you can see right now, every agency in Delaware County is out here responding to the scene. The individual inside set fire to the house, and it's been burning for quite a while now. They are putting the fire under control, and then we're going to deal with whether or not the shooter is still alive inside the house. So it's still an active crime scene. There's a lot still going on out here. I'm heading over to the hospital to see these two officers and to offer them my prayers and my thanks for what they've done.
I mean, do you know anything about the 11-year-old? Do you know how she's doing? Have you been?
We had no idea if there even is an 11-year-old. All we know is that there was a call that was the call they were responding to.
So it could have been a trap, is what you?
It could be. We have no evidence right now that it was or it wasn't. All I know is that the officers were responding to that call to our 911 center. Then as they came to the scene, they immediately were shot at by somebody from inside the house. So we've got no independent knowledge whether or not there is an 11-year-old, was an 11-year-old shot, who was inside the house. All that is to be determined because somebody set fire to the house. The shots have now stopped. The fire has largely burned out the house. And we're at the point now where officers are not only just taking control of the fire, but they're going to go in and make entry and try to stabilize the situation and find out the exact questions you're asking. Who was inside? Was there an 11-year-old girl? And if so, what happened?
You don't know anything about the person who was in there or anything like that?
Nothing.
Correct?
Nothing at this point. We're still trying to get inside the house to find out what happened. The house is largely burned out. I don't know if the person has burned himself to death. We don't know. All we know is that it's been burning for quite a while. It's largely burnt out. Police officers and fire department are here on scene. They're heroically putting that fire out, then to do the next phase of this, which is to go inside the house and see what happened.
I mean, Jack, we were all here for a news conference about a deadly shooting involving two 15-year-olds, and not 30 minutes later, this happened. When you heard this, I mean, just tell me what was going through your mind.
It's incredible. The level of violence that can happen in our communities because of gunfire and guns in the hands of the wrong people is just out of control. You're right. We were just together a couple hours ago talking about one 15-year-old who killed another 15-year-old with a ghost gun. And now we've got officers trying to respond to a call, which is an emergency call, and they take gunfire. That's just horrendous. That should not happen in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. So we've got to, as a society, deal with these problems. We as a law enforcement community are dealing with the situation at hand and making sure that our guys who run towards danger so the rest of us can run away are given the best care possible. So please, everyone, just pray for these two officers. I understand they're in stable condition, but I want to see them firsthand.
And that's where you're going right now?
Heading right now to the hospital.
Okay. And just, I know you're in a rush here. Do you know if the 911 call originated from the house that caught fire?
We don't know that. We do know an individual called, and from what I'm told, there was gunfire in the background that the 911 caller thought they heard. So it was an emergency call, and appropriately so, these officers immediately responded, came to the house, and were going to be ready to deal with the situation. My understanding, again, gunfire came directly at them. That's when they were hurt. Other officers responded. Delaware County, you can look here and you'll see every department in Delaware County represented here today. Everybody comes when somebody is in danger, and we're proud of our law enforcement community and the work they do.
All right, Jack, thanks. I know you need to get to the hospital. Thank you for talking
Thank
to
you.
us. You just heard from the district attorney here in Delaware County, Jack Stolzheimer. I just saw him walking away from the scene, was able to talk to him. Rick, Shari, that is the latest. We've gotten a lot of new information coming out of that.
Yeah, that was very helpful information in regards to how the call first came in. Not really clear then exactly who placed the call, but the 911 operator could hear gunfire in the background.
Yeah, and we know now that this was a case of arson as that crime scene continues to unfold. Let's go to Action News reporter Andy McCormick, who is live at the hospital where the two officers were taken. And Andy, what's the latest from there?
Well, like we just heard from the district attorney, Jack Stolzheimer, he's talking about how they're both in stable condition. We have heard that they are both alert and talking, and they are expected to be okay. We were here when we saw several family members arrive for those officers. One officer is an East Lansdowne officer. The other officer is from Lansdowne. Now, their police chiefs have already arrived here about 15 minutes ago, and they're inside talking with those officers and additionally with their family members as well. They're also joined by the Upper Darby Police Superintendent Tim Bernhardt. And one of the things that you're seeing here is the assembling of multiple police jurisdictions, including Philadelphia Police. In fact, Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel just walked out of the emergency room with a number of Philadelphia's top brass. They're out here to show their support. They're helping with traffic control out here, along with the University of Pennsylvania Police as well. Now, as far as East Lansdowne, which is only about 3.5 miles away from Penn Presbyterian, this is the closest trauma hospital, so that's that's why that they were brought here quickly. And of course, Lansdowne is the next door, the police department next door as well, and Upper Darby is close by, and that's why they are all assisting each other. So at this point, we're expecting to hear more. They are expected to have a press briefing here. They're waiting for the district attorney, who we just saw with John Paul, expected to be here in about a half hour. And some of the things that came out of that interview with John Paul, too, is one of the things that several people out here have been wondering. And in addition, those police officers wondering, too, is if there was an 11-year-old girl that was inside of that home. So right now you heard the DA say that they're not sure if there was even an injured 11-year-old at this time. So we're expected to hear more, hopefully within the next 20 minutes or so. For now, reporting live outside of Penn Presbyterian Hospital, Annie McCormick, Channel 6, Action News. Back to you.
Yeah, and when you see how intense those flames are, you're hoping that an 11-year-old is not involved in what has now unfolded at the home there. Okay, Annie, thanks.
Thank you, Annie. All right, 14 minutes after the hour. Again, we are continuing to follow this breaking news story from East Lansdowne. Action News has been following this since the top of the 4 o'clock hour, and we continue to get more information as to what has unfolded here as we look live at the scene. Okay, this is earlier video from the scene, but we do know 2 officers, as we heard, recuperating at the hospital as tactical units have converged at this scene. Let's go back to Action News reporter Becca Hendrickson, still there, where we continue to get more information as to what exactly happened here on 58 Lewis Avenue this afternoon, Becca.
Rick, we are on Lewis Avenue, as you were just talking, and in the past hour and a half or so since I've been here, we've been moved back once because of safety from the fire, and I just talked to a police officer. They want to move us back again to an elementary school close by for a press conference. Hopefully at that point we'll get more information from both the district attorney, who of course we just heard from with John, and the chief, who are going to be talking about the events of this afternoon. But really what we're focused on right now is what police are doing, what firefighters are doing to continue to try to make this situation as safe as possible for the neighborhood with this fire that has been burning for over an hour now. Police continuing to dump water on it. I'm told this fire started about 15 minutes after police got here in the first place. Just to rehash again, they were of course called for reports of that 11-year-old shot. When the 2 officers from Lansdowne and East Lansdowne came onto the scene, were told that they were shot at immediately and that suspect went into the house. What we don't know at this point is who was in that house when the fire started. Of course, we were told the suspect went in there. The suspect, it's unknown whether that person got out or not, if they were inside, if that 11-year-old was inside, who else was in the house. Those 2 officers transported immediately to Penn Presbyterian Hospital, where we're told that they're in stable condition, and they were talking. It appears they had some sort of leg wounds, but from then on it was a difficult situation for police, for firefighters, for all the emergency services throughout Delaware County, who have been pouring onto the scene for over an hour now to decide at what point it was safe to fight this fire. And of course, as we're looking at the smoke, we can see how drastically it's changed over the past hour and a half, as it was everything was on fire. It was dark smoke coming out of there. The back of the house was collapsing. Cars were on fire. Nearby structures started to come on fire. And at this point, firefighters continue to dump water on it, trying to get this fire out. Again, hopefully, we are told we're going to be talking to the chief and the district attorney again soon, and we'll try to bring more information as we learn it from that.
All right. Becca, thank you very much. Stand by, as we will continue to come back to you as more information becomes available where you are.
So this all began to unfold just before the 4 o'clock hour this afternoon, as we take a look at some of the video from that time of the day. Officers, 911, first responders receiving a 911 call that there was an emergency. The DA of Delaware County telling us that they heard gunshots in the background, and that's when they responded to this home. Once on the scene, the DA says the police officers were immediately under fire. This video here shows you then the tactical units and the tactical technology that was brought in because the home was not secure. They weren't sure if the threat was over, knowing that this 911 call came in and then officers were fired upon. And just a short time later, then the house was on fire, and the DA believes the person inside started this fire on purpose.
Right. Again, fire crews had to move very cautiously because of that active shooter situation. At this hour now, we still don't know the status of that suspect. As we heard from the district attorney, Jack Stolzheimer, he could very well have perished in that house. But again, This is a crime scene. Police are still on the scene trying to determine exactly the status of also an 11-year-old child, whether or not there was even a child in the house. But so many unanswered questions at this hour. Situation continuing to unfold, but certainly a crime scene here in East Lansdowne.
As you can imagine, those who live near this area, they are still trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And it's a terrifying situation if they're watching these images. Let's take a listen now to some of the neighbors we spoke with.
Heard a lot of gunshots as I just came from the store, and then I smelled the smoke like 10 minutes later, and I just seen cops and from everywhere, coming from I'm running in their vest and everything.
Did you hear any yelling? Did you hear?
I heard yelling, active shooter, get in the house, barricade, don't come out.
That's what the cops were saying?
Active shooter, get in the house. And I closed my doors, and I got a 2-story.
Okay, just one of many neighbors who were just trying to find out exactly what was going on and may have heard the gunshots when it exploded. Back to John Paul now at the scene. And John, again, this remains a very fluid situation. Any new information since we last talked to you?
No, the newest information we had came directly from the district attorney, who I just saw walking down the street, chased him down and got that information. And you watched it live along with me as he explained what all led up to this. It started with a 911 call, a report, and I want to emphasize a report of an 11-year-old being shot. And I do want to mention, I talked to some neighbors who said they didn't know about an 11-year-old there. So that'll need to be cleared up, and that's what the DA was saying as well. He needs to make sure that there was actually an 11-year-old who was shot. They don't know that to be the case, but either way, police responded. And he says, the DA, as soon as police got on scene, they took gunfire. And that matches up with what neighbors have been telling me as well. Neighbors heard the gunshots, looked outside, they saw officers coming under fire, and the officers returned fire. Shortly thereafter, the fire started at that house. I'm going to step out of the way. The house still burning. You can see the smoke coming from that area. Now it looks like even a family is being let back in with a small child. So this tells me that the scene is under control. And that seems to be backing them up what the DA was saying as well. They're just going to kind of have to wait until it's safe to go through what's left of that home and to find out if the shooter is alive. The way the DA said it, they don't know if the shooter burned up or not. But this is another soundbite we want to show you here from the DA just a short time ago. Let's take a listen. While we're waiting for that to come up, we just saw the mother and child walk maybe 4 houses down and go inside. So I'm not sure if they needed to retrieve something, but they were allowed to go through by the officers who have this whole area, this whole block is sealed off. They're not letting anyone through, but apparently they live here, so they must have needed to get something. And she did have a small child with her. She lives maybe 6 or 7 houses down on the other side. So I want to let you listen in on what the DA was telling me in the last 10 minutes.
The individual inside set fire to the house, and it's been burning for quite a while now. They are putting the fire under control, and then we're going to deal with whether or not the shooter is still alive inside the house. So it's still an active crime scene. There's a lot still going on out here.
There is still a lot going on out here right now. This is a firefighting operation with officers standing watch over what they are doing. They have to wait till they can put this whole thing out, and then they're going to have to go through what's left of that home. I mean, this is a crime scene. That is evidence. Though it may be burned up evidence, it is still evidence that'll be part of this entire investigation that'll start with that 911 call. The DA was saying in the 911 call in the background they could hear gunshots. That's why officers rushed to the scene, and then they came under fire themselves. They returned fire. We do not know who called 911. We also do not know the status of the person who was in that house who presumably set fire to that house. But those are all questions everyone is asking right now. We're hoping to hear more from the DA in about 30 minutes. He may have some more information for us. And again, we'll bring that live for you right here on Action News. So send it back to you guys.
Yeah, all of what he shared, though, vital updates that the DA was able to share and give us more context. John, thanks for getting that interview. We know that this was a harrowing situation, of course, for the officers involved. This is the video capturing one of the officers wounded and then being dragged to a safer space by his comrades and other officers.
Yeah, this is one of the first dramatic scenes that we saw when we first came on the air at 4 o'clock this afternoon, where there was words of 2 officers who were injured at the scene. This was one of them being dragged away from that house that was totally in flames, being brought into an ambulance, taken to the hospital. And the good news, as we've been able to discover, is that both officers are doing okay at this hour. They were conscious, they are alert, but again, police are still trying to determine exactly what transpired inside this home. Again, 58 Lewis Avenue, East Lansdowne, Delaware County. This is some of the video from earlier when the house was engulfed in flames. It's just a shell at this hour now. But again, so many dramatic moments that unfolded since the 4 o'clock hour. It is still a fluid scene. We're continuing to follow this breaking news story and bring you more information. Let's go to Action News reporter Annie McCormick again, who is still at the hospital with the very latest on the officers who were transported here. Annie.
Yeah, and Rick, within the past half hour is when the police chiefs from Lansdowne and East Lansdowne, and in addition to the Upper Darby police superintendent, all arrived here to the hospital. Right now, they are meeting with those officers who we've now learned are both in stable condition. We know that their families are here as well. We saw them brought to the scene. Obviously, a very emotional moment for them until they were able to actually see their loved ones and get into the hospital. At this point, we are also waiting for the district attorney who just saw at the scene with John Paul a short time ago. We're expecting him to arrive here before they address the media as well. Like you have been reporting and like we heard from the scene, that both of those officers that were taken here did arrive to that home and they did face gunfire when they arrived. Both, we were told, were hit by gunfire, but again, they are in stable condition and they are talking and they are expected to be okay. Still so much information they're trying to sort out right now, and I don't even know if we're going to find out all of the details about exactly what is happening at the scene yet. When we are addressed by officials, they may just stay on the conditions of the officers and the assistance that they're receiving from other departments as well. Anytime in law enforcement always bands together. Of course, Philadelphia police were out here. The commissioner, Kevin Bethel, was out here. He left about 15 minutes ago with a number of top brass from the Philadelphia Police Department here to show their support and lend support as well. East Lansdowne and Lansdowne Police Departments are very small departments. Upper Darby is the largest city near them in Delaware County, which is why they're receiving assistance from Superintendent Tim Bernhardt as well. We just saw another Upper Darby police officer arrive here too. It could be for a separate incident, but they're still they're helping with traffic out here, the Philadelphia Police Department and also University of Pennsylvania Police as well. But again, like we said, the family members of those officers have arrived here. Officers did bring them here to see their loved ones. The prognosis is good for those police officers. And again, what they're also wondering right now is if everyone is okay for the scene that they arrived to. That is one thing that we're told that is still on their minds at this point as they're fulfilling their duty to protect and serve. Now reporting live outside of Penn Presbyterian Hospital, Annie McCormick, Channel 6, Action News.
Hey, Annie, thank you so much for the update from the hospital where the officers are recovering. Let's go back to the scene where it is still, of course, a very active situation. Action News reporter John Paul is right there as we see this tactical unit on the way. John, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
okay.
We got this tactical truck coming out here. A bunch of SWAT officers coming out, leaving the scene. They just came down the street from right out in front of that house. A lot of officers coming out of this particular vehicle here. We saw some other officers go off to my left and walk away. I'm not sure why the SWAT team is moving out this way, but I do know there's multiple teams down there. So maybe they're just going to kind of swap out, or maybe the situation is under control to the point where they can start moving some of these out of the way and getting some of these officers out of that area.
Yeah,
but yeah, not sure why they just drove through.
John, that they wanted to make sure as officers are moved back and forth that they're protected.
Yeah, it's obvious. It's definitely a bulletproof vehicle. It says police rescue there on the side. Heavily armed SWAT officers getting out of it, but now they're getting it out of the way. I mean, obviously, right now what they need is fire apparatus, and they have that down there. So I'm guessing they're going to move some of these first responder trucks out of the way because the threat, the shooting threat, seems to have subsided at this point, Shari.
Well, as we know, of course, as the DA was explaining, John, that it's believed that that suspect is likely in the house. And boy, we saw that house burn for quite a while. We know not much of it is left standing.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing left of that house. And the way the DA put it was he doesn't know if the suspect burned up, but they're going to find out. And first things first, they need to get everything put out of that fire. They need to make sure that they can get through and start looking at the debris and combing through it. This is a crime scene. And Shari, I know you've been on crime scenes before. Rick, I know you have as well. This is going to take a while. There is a lot of information that they need to gather from that house. They're going to be sifting through this debris with a fine-tooth comb to find everything that they need to find, and they need to find the evidence that they are looking for. So expect this area here of Lewis Avenue. This will be closed for a time to come. So it's also going to beg questions from neighbors when they're going to be allowed to go back to their homes as well. These are all questions that they're going to be asking tonight.
Yep.
You raise a good point about
Thank you,
it's a fire investigation, also a criminal investigation as well.
Yeah, this could be one of the biggest crime scenes to happen in this part of the county in a long time. So many law enforcement agencies converging here. We're back live now as we look from the chopper of the home that continues to burn, the billowing smoke escaping into the evening air. Fire crews finally able to tackle the fire, but as we've been reporting since 4 o'clock, it took a while for them to move close to the house because there were reports of an active shooter who had somehow holed himself inside, and they were just for safety purposes. Law enforcement proceeded cautiously, fire crews proceeding cautiously, but right now we are watching as they continue to tackle the fire at what was this home here. It's now just the remains, the fiery, smoky remains of what was a family home, but more information continuing to unfold here as we heard from the district attorney, and we've heard from our reporters at the scene that there may not have been a child in the house. The whole thing apparently happened when there was a 911 call this afternoon of an 11-year-old apparently had been shot. We heard from the district attorney that that might not have happened, and that when officers did arrive, a gunman opened fire. 2 officers were hit, rushed to the hospital where they are recuperating, and that is what has brought us here to now, 5:31 the time now. We're continuing to follow this breaking news story here on Action News at 5, continuing to follow the information that's unfolding and bringing you the latest pictures, and also a neighborhood that has suddenly exploded into chaos and drama, and we're hearing from so many people trying to understand exactly what happened as police officers and fire crews tackle this dangerous situation here in East Lansdowne, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, this is Action News at 5 with Rick Williams and Shari Williams as we are covering this shooting. 2 officers being injured while responding to an emergency call. They were doing their job, and when they arrived on this address, they took on fire, according to the district attorney of Delaware County. The live images now from the aerial showing you all of the training that these firefighters have gone through. This definitely a very different type of call. When they first were brought in, they were told to stand back because they weren't sure if there was still a threat in this home, knowing that shots had been fired here, again at 58 East Lewis Avenue in East Lansdowne. So the firefighters had to stand back for quite a while. Once they were finally able to get up close, they're doing their job now to really get those hot spots out, but we still see all of this smoke billowing in this neighborhood, which I'm sure neighbors have not seen something like this before.
Yeah, and as we can tell from our chopper vantage point, just how close the houses are in this neighborhood, and the neighbors, again, trying to understand exactly what has happened on their street here on Lewis Avenue. And it will be some time before we actually find out exactly what happened, what transpired inside of this home, or what kind of violence might have taken place, if any at all. But again, so many unanswered questions that are slowly but surely being answered here at the scene and here in East Lansdowne. Let's go back to Action News reporter Becca Hendrickson, live at the scene now, continuing to get more information as we go into the evening hour. Becca.
Rick, we are still watching as police and firefighters continue to put this fire out. I want to give you a look behind me because while we may be further away than we were previously, you can still see so much of this smoke that's coming out of the home. Based on the color of it in a conversation that I just had, I am told that the fire is mostly out at this point. But as for what is inside that home is unknown. And it could be, you know, we just don't know at this point what that could be, because when that fire started, it was minutes after we're told that that suspect fired on police and went back into the house. So we don't know if that suspect ever made it out. We don't know the status of that 11-year-old who was initially a part of this. Was the initial call was for the shooting of an 11-year-old. So this crime scene is one that police are going to have to process, and it's one that first responders and police from all over Delaware County are focusing on right now. I do know that the police chief and the district attorney were on their way over to Penn Presbyterian, or they just arrived, hoping to get a updated status on those police officers and give us some more information soon, and then they'll come back here to the scene as we still process all of this information. But you can see just how astounding this is, just how many different pieces of apparatus, how many different police and firefighters we have here from all over the county. That smoke still high in the air. A lot of these neighbors still concerned, that people trying to figure out exactly what happened. Those horrifying moments around 3:50 p.m. when that first 911 call came in, according to that initial conversation from the district attorney, where you could hear those shots in that 911 call, and then police getting to the scene, immediately being fired upon, those officers being taken to Penn Presbyterian, where again we're told that they're in stable condition, that they're talking, they suffered some sort of leg wound, and then that suspect going back into the house and that fire breaking out just a couple minutes later. That fire that burned for over an hour and a half now, as firefighters and police finally deemed it safe enough to try to put out. You can see the emergency services truck here, of course some fire trucks in this distance. It's going to be a long night here in East Lansdowne as police and investigators try to piece together exactly what happened here. A horrifying scene, really.
Absolutely. Becca, quick question before we let you go. Do you get the sense from where you are that there is a concerted lack of urgency now as to compared to when you first arrived on the scene? You know, you and John both saw the rushing police cars and SWAT teams passing you by as you were heading here. Do you get the sense now as we go into this evening that there's more of a not that the situation is over, because it isn't, but there's a more of a less of an urgent situation than there was maybe an hour and a half ago?
I would agree with that, Rick, and part of the reason why, from what we've seen, a couple of the police and first responders that were here, that were filling up this block of Lewis Avenue, you can see even it looks a little more empty right now. A couple of those cars were able to pull away. We've also seen some of the officers who were initially up at that house on 58 Lewis Avenue. Some of them have been able to walk away as well, a little more casually, not like, of course, when we first got here, when we saw all of those sirens blaring, all of those people screaming into the scene. So a much different type of attitude on the scene here now. And that's displayed too just in the fact that firefighters were able to start dumping water on this fire. There was a threat here for a long time, and there still could be, of course, with the fire, but the other threat was the active shooter who retreated into the house. So emergency services had to figure a lot of that out. If it were safe to start dumping water on that house, who exactly could have been in that house, and if more first responders were going to be put in danger responding to this house, since as soon as those two initial police officers got here, they were immediately shot at.
Yeah, and it appears, Beck, as we are taking a live look from the aerial and from the ground, the epicenter of this entire thing, that structure on fire. But it looks like also the home next door is now suffering some damage, and they're also trying to put out a few cars that are also on fire. Becca, stand by. We'll be back in touch with you in a moment. Let's go now to Action News reporter John Paul, who's on the other side of this of the neighborhood, across from where Becca is. And so, John Paul, what's your vantage point from where you are?
Well, the smoke has dissipated here in the last maybe 30 minutes or so. We've seen a lot of officers leaving the area. A lot of the outside agencies seem to be leaving the area. I'll step out of the way. You can still see some still going in, but we just saw a neighbor come out. Well, I guess I can't call her a neighbor. She was visiting her neighbor who lives right by where the shooting happened. So we stopped and talked with her. She said that they were unloading groceries and they started to hear the gunshots. That's when the officers arrived and more gunfire. They did not know what to do. They all ran inside and they stayed put. They have stayed there until just about 5 minutes ago when officers said it was safe for them to get out of their house and leave the area. She said she was frightened the entire time. She didn't know who was shooting. All she knew was she kept hearing gunshots and she needed to get to safety. She just was allowed to leave the area, which is telling me that this is under control. This is a secure scene. They're letting neighbors out. In fact, I've actually seen some people starting to walk down, some civilians walking over that way, and it looks like there might even be a neighbor out on her porch now. Maybe I can see if I can make my way down there and talk to her. But that visitor leaving the area, she just wanted to go home. She had been staying put for, what, 2 hours or so? She was just able to leave in the last couple of minutes. Shari, Rick.
All right. John, thank you. We should mention that we're waiting a news conference to take place at the hospital where the two officers were transported. They are hospitalized at this hour, both recovering from their wounds at this scene. As we continue to look live from above the situation, more information coming our way, but when those news conferences gets underway at the Penn Presbyterian Hospital, we will take that to you. But in the meantime, again, an army of fire crews still at the scene, tackling what was an inferno at this home here on Lewis Avenue. As we've been hearing from our reporters, the situation a lot calmer than it was just in about an hour and 40 minutes ago. But again, so many questions that need to be answered, and specifically the status of that active shooter that kind of started this whole drama. We want to hear from a neighbor who was here at the scene on this street when we first arrived, and just some of the sentiments from the people who lived here earlier this afternoon. Let's take a listen to that.
I just saw a lot of gunshots, heard a lot of gunshots as I just came from the store. And then I smelled the smoke like 10 minutes later, and I just seen cops from everywhere, coming from everywhere. I'm running in their vest and everything. I heard yelling, active shooter, get in the house, barricade, don't come out.
That's what the cops were saying?
Active shooter, get in the house. I did see one officer get loaded into the back of the ambulance.
Yeah.
I think that wasn't the one that was dragged away. There was another one. It looked like he was holding his hand.
Yeah, neighbors, of course, gathering all the information they can from what they can see, from what they can hear, and a lot of it just pure shock. This gentleman here just going about his day, running his errands, and then this is what he returned to the neighborhood to see and to find. When we talk about the timeline of all of this, just before 4 o'clock, a 911 call coming in here in East Lansdowne. The operator hearing gunshots in the background, then sent first responders. This at 58 Lewis Avenue, East Lansdowne. Those officers, once arriving on the address, were shot at. 2 of those officers, we are now learning, were injured, and they are recovering at Penn Presbyterian Hospital. After the shots were fired, we then know that the house began to smoke.
Right.
And so the belief is whoever fired those shots went back in this home and started a fire.
Yeah, earlier we weren't sure how the fire may have started when officers arrived on the scene, but as we were able to confirm from District Attorney DA Jack Stolheimer, the active shooters purposefully started the fire inside the house, and which kept fire crews at bay for several minutes because of that active shooter situation. But right now they've been tackling the fire. The house is again just a shell of what it was, and the investigation now underway as to exactly where that active shooter is, if he's even alive, whether there was an 11-year-old child inside the home, which again caused that initial 911 call, and just again a crime scene that continues to unfold this hour here in East Lansdowne. So many law enforcement agencies that had arrived here, that had converged here, have now been taken away. The situation not as urgent but again, it's still a crime scene, and it will be that way throughout the evening as we continue to follow this breaking news story.
Let's go now to Action News reporter Annie McCormick, who is there at Penn Presbyterian where the officers were taken. And Annie, one of the things that we were talking about is how law enforcement, they look out for each other. They know what it's like to be in the line of fire. And when this call came in from East Lansdowne, Philadelphia police then made the streets in a way where they could get this officer, both of them, to the hospital quickly.
Yeah, and even within Delaware County, too, Shari, they were assisting because East Lansdowne's police department and Lansdowne's police department are very small. There's only several officers in each of those departments. So Upper Darby Police, which is the larger borough around there, also stepped in to help with their superintendent, bringing the police chiefs over here to the hospital to see both of their officers that were brought here just before 4 o'clock. Now, and also Philadelphia police, like you were saying, making sure that the streets were open, that they could get here quickly. All of that communication they had so that way they could be brought here as quick as possible. Of course, East Lansdowne, only about 3.5 miles from Penn Presbyterian Hospital. This is the #1 trauma hospital, though, the closest to them. So this is naturally where they would be brought. We are still waiting for the district attorney to arrive here. He should be here at any moment, but before he will address the media, he will, of course, go upstairs and talk to at least the family members of those officers and probably those officers as well. Right now, within the past 45 minutes, the East Lansdowne and Lansdowne chiefs, along with Upper Darby Superintendent Tim Bernhardt, all went inside to speak to those officers and also speak to their families as well. We, of course, will want to know how they are doing, their conditions. We're told that they're stable, that they're expected to be okay, that they are conscious, that they are talking. But there's going to be a lot of questions, too, that the police departments will have for those officers and the district attorney's office as well that we will not learn right away, because those will all be part of this investigation that is still unfolding. What we do know is when both of those officers did respond to that home, as we're hearing from John Paul and additionally Becca Hendrickson as well, they were met with gunfire. Both of them were shot and they were brought here. At this point, I know there's a little activity going on behind me right now, so I know some people are arriving. Who is that? Okay, District Attorney Stolzheimer, as you can see, Albert's going to zoom in right there. He just arrived here to the emergency room, so he will now go upstairs and he will talk to those officers, find out information, and then together we are expecting for both of the police chiefs from each of the departments of the injured officers will then come down with him, and additionally Upper Darby's police superintendent as well, to give us a little bit more information. There's still so many questions about exactly what happened out there, what exactly was going on inside of the home. We don't even know if we'll get all of those answers yet at this point. The good news is that we do hear that both of those officers are stable, are talking, and are able to talk to their loved ones who have arrived here as well. But we're hoping to hear more information. I'm giving a guesstimate about probably 20 minutes, that the district attorney will probably come downstairs to address the media as well. We'll bring that to you live, of course. We're now reporting live outside of Penn Presbyterian Hospital. Annie McCormick, Channel 6, Action News.
All right, Annie, thank you. And just confirm something before we let you go, that these two officers, they were from two different departments, correct? They weren't partners, but they were from two different jurisdictions who just happened to arrive at the scene simultaneously, correct?
Correct. And just to give you an idea, too, in Delaware County, East Lansdowne and Lansdowne are right next to each other. They're very small departments, and so many of those towns and boroughs all around in that area, Fulcroft, Darby, Sharon Hill, East Lansdowne, they're all small departments, but they all help each other out. And Upper Darby is really the largest one. Chester also is the largest one. They kind of sandwich each other around a lot of those smaller boroughs, and so they're always helping each other out, always willing to assist. We often see Upper Darby assisting a lot of those smaller Delaware County boroughs consistently, even responding to calls as well.
All right. Annie McCormick, live from the hospital. We will go back to you when that news conference gets underway. Thank you very much, and stand by.
Yeah, we're also expecting a possible news update, news conference closer to the scene in Delaware County as well. I'm sure the neighbors and those who live in that area are going to want to know as much as possible, as this is impacting them firsthand. Those who are on the scene, who can smell the smoke, who've seen the flames, who have wondered if their neighbors are okay. And of course, those who may know this area, who've been just watching it unfold since before 4 this afternoon.
Absolutely, and we continue to hear from some of the neighbors that we talked to earlier about what happened when they realized that something was amiss on this street here in Lewis Avenue. Let's hear from a woman that we talked to earlier this afternoon, that when she realized that the scene, her neighborhood, was certainly had become chaotic.
I just heard a lot of shots. I thought they were shots, but there were so many, and they were so spread apart, and they went on for so long that I thought there was no way they could be gunshots. And people were playing in their front yards. There were kids outside. I think most people were under the impression that they couldn't be gunshots. And then as soon as I turned onto Baltimore Ave, police and rescue vehicles came. When I first arrived, it was really active, and there were a lot of police taking cover and running down that way. So I hid in that kitchen. I went into that kitchen store, and they locked the door, and we hung out there for a little bit.
You went into a business, and they locked you in to protect you.
Yes.
Wow. You know, we report and cover so much violence, but when then it's on your street and you're responding to it. She talked about children being outside, people going about their daily life, playing in the front yard. And for her, she could hear these shots, these succession of gunshots just while she was traveling in her vehicle.
Exactly. We talked to one neighbor, said he was sitting on his couch watching television, and he heard gunfire and looked out his window and suddenly saw a police officer being dragged away from the scene. So many neighbors will have so many different stories to tell about what transpired here in their neighborhood in East Lansdowne, Pennsylvania, just after 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's been almost 2 hours now that we've been following the story, that police have been converging here along with fire crews, continuing to determine exactly what happened. This is a crime scene, still a fluid situation, still so many questions to answer as to what exactly happened. But again, there is good news. The status of those 2 officers who were shot, recuperating at the hospital. And again, we're waiting for a news conference to take place there. We'll go to it once it does. But once again, live here in East Lansdowne as we look from our chopper vantage point, as fire crews continue to hose down hot spots, as this house continues to crumble and become just a shell of what was a family home, but is now just a dilapidated crime scene.
Yeah, and as we talk about the hot spots, the firefighters here have been working on this vehicle for quite a while. We know, of course, it likely has gasoline, and they've been tending to that hot spot. They are, and the fire isn't out, but it is under control. And we know once it is out and safe enough to go inside, that criminal investigation is going to go into the next gear, because they are right now trying to figure out the person who fired at their officers. Where is that person and who is that person?
Absolutely. Anytime there's an active shooter situation, police and fire crews, emergency units have to be very, very cautious when they approach. All right, let's go back to Action News reporter John Paul, live at the scene down below with the very latest from his vantage point. John.
Yeah, Rick, sorry, the smell is really dissipated from that fire. It looks like they have this thing just about completely out. I don't even see any smoke coming from that area at all, but I have seen firefighters, I've seen SWAT officers, police officers, all exiting this area. They're coming our way. They're getting into their vehicles. They're starting to wrap up their hoses. This scene seems secure. We have actually noticed more helicopters coming in, though. Looks like at least one police helicopter flying very low over the scene. But many officers have been leaving that area and coming our way. They are wrapping things up. A lot of the departments that came to help out from other jurisdictions, they seem to be the ones who are leaving first. But there obviously are still a lot of officers still right there in front of that crime scene, keeping it secure. They have not let any of us go beyond this point right here. Even though the tape has come down, they're asking us to stay back from the area. Of course, we're going to respect that. This is an active crime scene. There are still officers down there, but many are leaving. So it does look like the bulk of this is over. The scene is definitely secured. It's a different feeling now here. People are exiting and wrapping things up here on the scene. That is the latest information as I have it, standing right here on Baltimore, just half a block away from the scene.
Well, John, when they got there, it was top of the 4 o'clock hour, and there was plenty of sunshine. Now it's about to be nightfall for the first responders to do their best to continue their work. Have you taken note of any command center, any movement for them to prepare to work on this through the evening?
That's a really good question, and it seems to me the command center is basically what you're looking at. It's down the street. I did see several higher-ups coming our way. They must be debriefing. A lot of people have been leaving this scene, though. But as for a command center, no, not set up where I am. As we're watching here, more firefighters are walking our way. There's still a lot of water that's running down this street, though. I mean, the storm drain is backing up. There's so much water. So there's definitely still water being poured onto whatever is left of that house. But the scene is under control. Many of the firefighters are leaving. And this is going to become now a scene for the investigators to comb through and to find that evidence that they need in this situation, so they can find out what happened to the person who was in that house, who authorities are saying fired on officers. Where is he? Was there an 11-year-old child involved in any of this? That was one of the big questions that the district attorney was asking. Was there really an 11-year-old who was shot? That was the initial 911 call that came in. And the debris is going to hold the answer to those questions.
It's going to be interesting to see.
This will be an active scene for a long time.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see then how they'll work this into the nightfall, as we've been on these scenes before, and they bring in the large floodlights, just depending on how far along they want to get in this investigation tonight, especially getting to that suspected shooter.
Yeah, but the good news is, John, and again, thank you for your update. As day turns to night here in this neighborhood, the urgency has dissipated. It's just a crime scene that police and fire crews continue to focus on. But again, it's less of a dramatic scene than it was just 2 hours ago, when neighbors didn't understand what was going on, and police officers, again, being kept at bay along with fire crews because of this active shooter situation.
We want to get a quick update to Action News reporter Walter Perez, who is now also near the scene. Walter.
Hey guys, I'm here with a gentleman named Ed O'Neill, who lives on the block a few houses away from where the whole thing occurred. And just walk me through what you saw today driving back home earlier.
Well, driving home, I saw the police, followed quickly by the fire trucks, and then I saw the smoke coming nearby, and I realized it was close to my home. Caught up in all the traffic trying to get away from that, and then walked up here, and it was a crime scene. I was unaware that anything about the shooting. I was unaware of anything, essentially, except that a fire was happening. And here we are, and now I find out that there's been a shooting, and it's terrible.
And I was going to say, at that moment, you didn't know what was going on. Now you do. What is your reaction to know this was a few houses away?
I'm devastated. I'm shocked. I really am. No words.
Thank you. I do appreciate your time.
Sure.
So once again, guys, that's the situation at this location, about a block away from the home. We'll have much more coming up on Action News at 6. Reporting live from East Lansdowne, Walter Perez, Channel 6, Action News.
All right. Walter, thank you. And we will continue to follow this story on Action News at 6. Want to take one more shot from our chopper at the scene? All right, let's do that again. Fire crews still on the scene, battling what was left of this house. Billowing smoke still escaping to the night sky now. It has been 2 hours since they have converged here. But again, it is an active crime scene, and you can still see some hot spots still needing to be taken care of here at this house. Again, it was 58 Lewis Avenue, East Lansdowne. But we're continuing to follow the scene as we continue to move into Action News at 6.
Yeah, it has been all hands on deck for those who are in the fire departments in this area, and also for police who've all responded to this. They've come from all over to be a part of this investigation. 2 officers injured responding to a shooting in East Lansdowne.
All right.
That's it for Action News at 5. For Rick Williams, I'm Shari Williams. Action News at 6 is coming up next.
All right, thanks for joining us.
My son was failing. It's very disheartening. Huntington has changed my son's life. Because of Huntington, my son now has straight A's and B's. It's priceless.
Huntington Learning Center. For tutoring and test prep, call 1-800-CAN-LEARN today.
And the first rule of marketing, never do the same thing twice.
No!
Wrong. I gotta do the kick of destiny again.
What?
But this time, fans can pick if I'll make or miss for 10
Brian Taft.
This was the scene some 90 minutes ago as flames ravaged an East Lansdowne home, the focus of a tense and dangerous standoff. It all unfolded over the course of roughly an hour this afternoon, beginning with a call of a child shot in that home along Lewis Avenue, escalating the shots fired at officers, and ending with that home all but destroyed. The condition of that child reportedly shot still unknown tonight. It is Wednesday night, and the big story on Action News tonight is the chaotic ordeal you watch play out live here this afternoon. 2 officers shot, a house destroyed, a neighborhood taking cover. A live look now, a helicopter over the scene, what remains of that home, 58 Lewis Avenue in East Lansdowne, reduced to ashes. Officers, we now know, responded here just before 4 o'clock today, hearing word that an 11-year-old had been shot inside. When they got there, the officers came under fire themselves, then returned fire. 2 of those officers shot in that exchange, both taken to Penn Presbyterian Hospital. What played out then was an exceptionally anxious standoff. We have live team coverage of the entire situation tonight. Becca Hendrickson live at the scene. Maggie Kent at the hospital where the 2 officers were taken. Walter Perez in the neighborhood, hearing from people who watched helplessly as this all unfolded. But we're going to begin with John Paul tonight, also on the scene, as he was throughout the ordeal today. John, you were first on the scene today. What an afternoon it's been.
Yeah, it has been an afternoon, and it's changing by the minute as we're seeing more police officers, SWAT teams, fire trucks leaving this area. I'll step out of the way as we're watching them coming out. So this scene is definitely different from what it was, Brian, at 4 o'clock. It is under control. More officers walking our way. Water still pouring down the street from that fire as we have seen this scene change, and we're actually being pushed to the side, Brian, so that might affect our shot just a little bit. But I do want to show you some video of how it all started. It started as a call for a girl that was shot, an 11-year-old who was shot. The 911 call came through, and they heard gunshots in the background. They rushed to the scene. As soon as officers got on scene, they came under fire. They were taking gunfire. A neighbor told me officers fired back. From the chopper, we could see an officer being taken to an ambulance. Neighbors say at least 2 officers were taken, and we know that 2 officers were shot here on the scene. But then things changed. A fire started in that house, flames leaping into the air. Firefighters arrived at the scene, but they could not go fight that fire. It was not safe after the gunfight that had unfolded there on that street. They couldn't let the firefighters in, so they had to let it burn, and burn it did. Ashes shooting into the air, debris falling on people nearby, the whole area filled with smoke. That house burned to the ground. There's basically nothing left of that house right now. Houses on either side were also impacted by that fire. The district attorney, Jack Stolzheimer, told me that they're going to have to go through that wreckage, that ash. They're going to have to look for that person who fired at officers. Here's what he had to say a short time ago.
They responded, and they immediately took gunfire from the house. Somebody shot at them. 2 officers had been injured. My understanding is they are going to be okay. They're in stable condition, but we're saying our prayers for them right now. Everybody in Delaware County should be praying for these 2 officers who ran towards fire when everybody else could run away from it. As you can see right now, every agency in Delaware County is out here responding to the scene. The individual inside set fire to the house, and it's been burning for quite a while now. They are putting the fire under control. and then we're going to deal with whether or not the shooter is still alive inside the house.
There's no word on who that shooter may be. There's no word on who called 911. Those are all questions that will need to be answered. There's also there's no word on who called 911. We don't know if there was actually a girl in that home.
Hey, John,
that is the latest information we have on the scene as things are wrapping up.
Yeah,
here.
forgive me for interrupting you here, John. We've been waiting a news conference, and we're getting word that that news conference is just about to begin. You mentioned DA Jack Stolzheimer. Here he is at a school nearby the scene that unfolded today. There's also an army of police chiefs nearby. As we said, this was a multi-agency response today. Numerous police departments, numerous fire departments on the scene, and so much to comb through as this was just a tremendous effort simply coordinating that response. We expect that he's going to give us some
My name is Jack
detail.
Stolzheimer. I'm the District Attorney of Delaware County. I'm joined here today by the police chiefs from Lansdowne, East Lansdowne, the superintendent of the Upper Darby Police Department, and the mayors of Lansdowne and East Lansdowne to talk about the tragic but heroic situation that took place this afternoon. At about 3:47 this afternoon, a call went out from our 911 center that an 11-year-old girl had been shot on a property at 58 Lewis Street in East Lansdowne Borough. Police officers from Upper Darby, Lansdowne, and East Lansdowne immediately responded to that call. And braving the danger, they ran up towards danger so that the rest of us can run away from it. They were immediately met by gunfire. And 2 officers have been struck, one from Lansdowne, one from East Lansdowne. They are both doing okay. I just visited with their family, as we all did. They are being taken care of in great care here at the hospital. We expect them to be perfectly fine, but they have been through a trauma. And it was because of the Upper Darby Police Department, who also responded to that call, that these officers are alive today. They were dragged out of danger by Upper Darby police officers. Everybody in law enforcement in Delaware County works together. And we just had a tremendous showing of all of our mutual aid. All of our departments were on scene, some are still on scene, and East Lansdowne dealing with the aftermath of this. As you know, the house was then set on fire. We don't know who the occupants are. We don't know who the shooter was at this point. We don't know how many people are in there or even if they're even still alive. Our compatriots and our colleagues are on scene dealing with that right now. But we are happy to tell people in Delaware County right now that keep praying for these officers and their family, but they're doing well. They're going to be okay. Thank God for that. And I just can't thank these officers and this team enough for the heroism displayed every single day by our police officers throughout the county, but particularly today. I can't thank Upper Darby police officers enough for what they did to drag these 2 gentlemen away from the gunfire, or we might be having a whole different conversation tonight about what happened.
Any validity to the initial?
We have no idea. Let me just say right now, we are still actively investigating the scene. We don't know who was in the house. We don't know who the shooter was. We don't know how many people are in there. We don't know their status. We don't know if they're alive. Police officers right now are making sure that that scene is secure. The gunfire has stopped. I just left that scene. Some of us, the chiefs, did as well. The house was still on fire. So we weren't able to make entry yet into the house because we're taking it safely for all of the officers on scene. But we will get to the bottom of it, and we will continue that investigation to know whether or not an 11-year-old girl was or was not shot, but more importantly, who shot these police officers, and we intend to hold everyone accountable.
Jack, can you explain to the people who are watching this on TV and wondering why you weren't putting out the fire, just explain to the neighbors and everything why you weren't putting out that fire?
Sure, because officers were taking gunfire. The police officers and the fire department who were out there were still shots coming out at the beginning of this fire scene. So we want to make sure, and some of our police chiefs are out there right now. Some of our police chiefs in Delaware County are also fire chiefs. Okay, so they're out there actively controlling that scene. But there is nobody else in danger. We've made sure that the entire block has been emptied of people, and that fire is now mostly under control. But again, we're not going to go make entry into that house until we know that the fire is under control and that it's safe for those officers to go in there. We don't want another single officer hurt tonight in Delaware County.
Jack, can you give us some about how the Upper Darby officers, they get on scene, and can you explain more about how they were dragging them? How did that all play out?
I'm going to answer that question. In fact, I'm going to let Superintendent Bernhardt answer that question. But Annie, I can't tell you the exact details of their injuries right now. Their families are with them. I want to protect their privacy at this point. I don't want to tell you the officers' names or their injuries. They are not life-threatening injuries. Both officers are going to be fine, God willing, but they are doing okay, and they're here getting great treatment.
But they weren't both shot.
They were both shot.
Okay. And
with
once each?
One each. Yeah, one wound each.
And both males?
Yes, male police officers.
Can you tell us how long they've been with the departments for?
Chief.
Mine's 22 years.
Veteran police officers, 22 years. The officer from East Lansdowne, 22 from Lansdowne.
And how many officers are in your? You have a small department, right?
We don't want to take a lot. They're not going to take a lot of questions. They're going to go back inside and talk to the family. But I do want to have Superintendent Bernhardt, because I think this is a very important. I think people need to know how heroic our police officers are, not just responding to a call, but taking care of each other. Ken, would you mind?
Absolutely, John. Yes. So like the district attorney said today, that call went out for shots fired in the borough of East Lansdowne. The borough of East Lansdowne borders Upper Darby Township, and we work well with them and work with them daily. When that call went out, our officers automatically responded to that scene on the uniblock of Lewis Avenue. Our uniform patrol responded and saw 2 officers, and they advised our officers that they had been shot. Our officers, numerous officers responded, got ballistic shields, and were able to go onto that street, drag those officers out. One of those officers was transported here by one of our marked police cars. The other uniform officers from Upper Darby were able to drag the other officer to an awaiting ambulance and was driven here as well.
Tim, were your officers taking fire too when they were dragging those officers?
All officers that were on scene initially were taken on fire, and then when they removed themselves from it, there was no more gunfire at that point.
We're now going to go back inside. These guys have to go deal with the situation that is still unfolding in East Lansdowne. I appreciate you all being here. We want you to know that these officers are doing well. We ask for the continued prayers for them and their family. They have to recover from this trauma. But thank you for taking the time tonight. We're going to go back inside and continue dealing with the ongoing problem. Thank you.
And you've been listening to the first news conference since this entire chaotic ordeal began to unfold just before 4 o'clock today. DA Jack Stolzheimer there and Upper Darby Superintendent Timothy Bernhardt giving us one piece of news there, which is that both officers who were injured in this were struck by gunfire. Initial reports was that the first was hit by a bullet. We did not know about the second. We can confirm tonight the 2 officers were in fact shot, one from Lansdowne, one from East Lansdowne. The headline, God willing, gratefully, they are both okay tonight. They are conscious, they are alert, they are talking to their family. But the DA also focusing tonight on the absolute heroism on display there today by police officers and fire crews. That heroism absolutely evident to anybody and everybody who watched this unfold. As the bullets were being fired from that house, more officers showed up. As the flames got bigger, more fire crews showed up on the scene, all to try to keep people in this neighborhood safe and to prevent a really bad situation from getting any worse today. And this, a live look tonight from a helicopter at what remains of that home at 58 Lewis Avenue in East Lansdowne. I want to get to a piece of video which I think tells a compelling moment throughout this day. There were scores of officers on the scene, as we said, more arriving by the minute today. Many of them were taking cover behind cars and neighboring homes, their guns trained on that home you see. But if we can roll this particular piece of video, I want to draw your attention to what happened shortly thereafter. At some point, SWAT officers were able to move in, get as close as they could to that house. You see some of the SWAT teams arriving here, and take a look at the center of your screen. They began to ram through the front of that house, breaking through, perhaps with the hope that anyone inside who might have been injured might be able to be pulled to safety. As we know, there were reports that an 11-year-old girl was inside that house, shot by someone else inside. Alas, that was not the case. No one was removed. That tactical vehicle did retreat a short time later. Clearly a massive effort to coordinate that enormous response. Investigators just now beginning the process of trying to understand what happened here, what caused this. Becca Hendrickson has been listening to that news conference. She's also on the scene. She was talking to so many neighbors today. Becca, what more can you tell us tonight?
Brian, we learned a lot from that latest news conference from both the district attorney and the police chiefs from Upper Darby. Here on the scene, though, it remains active. While a lot of those first responders who came pouring in were able to leave at this point, I do need to point out that this fire situation is not over. Take a look behind me. We can still see that smoke coming out of 58 Lewis Avenue about a block away. That fire again burning for more than 2 hours now. It started, as we understand, just a couple minutes after police originally came to the scene. Let's go over again exactly what the district attorney and what the police chief were saying. Officers from Lansdowne, East Lansdowne, Upper Darby all responded to that initial 911 call about 11-year-old who was shot, an 11-year-old girl. When those officers got here, they were immediately fired upon, and not just the 2 officers who were hit, all of the officers. We heard of the heroism of the Upper Darby officers who were able to take the one officer from Lansdowne to the hospital. Another officer was dragged to an ambulance and taken to Penn Presbyterian. Thankfully, we have learned at this point that both of those officers are in stable condition. They're talking, they're doing okay. The district attorney saying that he was able to speak with their families. And from what you can understand, and really what we've seen here over the last 2.5 hours, just how dangerous this scene was, Brian. There was an active shooter who went back into that house that delayed police's ability to go to the house and start to put out the fire. So not only do we have the threat of gunfire, then we have the threat of fire itself, that smoke. We remember it, we saw it, the flames shooting out of the roof of that house, all of that black smoke in the air, causing that home to collapse and making other structures around it, cars, other homes, to catch on fire. The danger that all of these neighbors in East Lansdowne were in, not only along Lewis Avenue, but all around it, as they had to hide from those flames. Police from every department in Delaware County working very hard, of course, to continue to keep people safe, continually pushing them back further and further from that home on 58 Lewis Avenue. Of course, we just heard from the district attorney and the police chief. They said they're going back upstairs inside of Penn Presbyterian to learn more information. After they do that, Brian, we do expect them to come back here in East Lansdowne, give us more information. Some outstanding questions we have at this point: who all was in that house when that active shooter went back inside, when the house started to burn? That's an unknown question at this point. After that active shooter went back in the house, no more shots were fired, but also no one was seen leaving that house. This is a crime scene. This is one that police are going to be processing for some time, investigating, getting to the bottom of who that shooter was, who was in that house, and what their status is now, Brian.
Yeah, some key fundamental questions. Was it just the shooter and that reported 11-year-old child inside the house, or were there more people? We just simply don't know at this point, and that investigation is just beginning now. Becca, thank you. So many dramatic moments here today. Our helicopter overhead in those first frantic moments just after police came under fire and realized they had an active shooter situation on their hands. This is how it looked as one of those 2 officers, we have since learned, was shot, was dragged from the scene out of harm's way into a waiting ambulance nearby. You can see officers running to his aid, others running to get him from that sidewalk to that ambulance. He was one of 2 officers, as we learned, shot in this ordeal. Obviously, the condition of this officer is top of mind tonight. They were taken to Penn Presbyterian. Action News reporter Maggie Kent has been there for the last several hours. Maggie, all those officials we just heard from just went back inside. What more can you tell us?
Well, Brian, as you show that video, DA Stolzheimer, the district attorney for Delaware County, says Delaware County works together, and he was talking about the heroism of those Upper Darby police officers, saying if they were not there, if they did not take on that active gunfire and drag their fellow brothers in blue out of that situation who had been shot, this could be a very different situation. He came out tonight after speaking with those officers and their families to tell us that they will be okay. Thankfully, both of those officers, one from East Lansdowne, the other from Lansdowne Police Department, they're veteran officers. Both have been on the force for more than 2 decades each. Now, they were responding, as we know, to that call for an 11-year-old girl who was shot when they were immediately met by gunfire. Both of them were shot and immediately brought here to this trauma center, which is not far from the location. This is where, unfortunately, we've seen a number of officers who have suffered injuries being brought. They know what to do here at Penn Presbyterian Hospital. And tonight you'll see the large police presence of support outside this hospital, both for the officers and their families who are inside. We know these officers will survive their injuries. We didn't get any details other than both were shot one time. They will be admitted tonight and they will not be released this evening, maybe not even tomorrow, depending on the extent of those injuries. But DA Stolzheimer's, again, reiterating that thankfully these officers will be okay. And a lot of that, in large part, has to do with the officers, the heroic actions of their fellow officers from the Upper Darby Police Department, dragging them away to safety and then transporting them here, one by a squad car, the other by a waiting ambulance. So far, we've learned that those officers are up, they're talking, they're able to express themselves and tell a little bit about what happened here. We've seen detectives going in, I'm sure, to interview these officers about what happened on scene. And as I mentioned, D.A. Stolzheimer's, he's heading back inside right now to speak with them, to get a little bit more information. And then those top brass, those chiefs, after leaving their officers in the hospital, have to go back to the scene to learn more about what happened there. And of course, continue this long investigation. We're live at Penn Presbyterian. Maggie Kent, Channel 6 Action News. Brian.
Yeah, as your camera zoomed in, you're talking about Upper Darby. I saw Superintendent Tim Burkhart there standing outside the door from Upper Darby Police. Just a large number of heroes on the scene and right there behind you tonight. Maggie, thank you. From the hospital, let's get you back to the scene, which remains very active. Fire crews still dousing that home, tending to homes nearby. Still some hot spots and vehicles next to that house. Walter, from where you are positioned, what can you see right now?
Well, Brian, at this point, I can't see a lot. I'm about a block away, but I'm joined by one of the neighbors here who lives nearby. His name is Sean Ferguson. And Sean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, tell me what this whole experience has been like and what you've gone through over the past hour or two.
Yeah, about 3:30, I heard a couple of shots, then a few more shots, then a lot of shots. Looked out my door. Cops said, get back in your door. It's an active shooter, so I got back in. And waited.
How long were you barricaded, or not barricaded, but stuck inside your house?
I stayed in the house for about maybe 40 minutes or so. And then once I didn't hear no more fire, no more gunfire, I came to the door and saw the police tape, went behind the police tape because I wanted to talk out to see what's going on. And I was out here during the course of the afternoon. And about maybe 30 minutes or so, they let us back in our house, but we don't have power right now.
I can't even imagine what that was like. I mean, explain for someone how few people have gone through an experience like this. What was that like?
East Lansdowne is real quiet, is a real close-knit community, and we don't hear gunshots. And it was wild. It was crazy. It was just crazy.
Do you happen to know anybody involved, you know?
No, it's further down on my block. I don't know the neighbors. I don't know if there was a child involved or not. I didn't hear that. I did see one officer get loaded into the ambulance. I think he was the second officer. They got maybe a hand graze because he walked inside the ambulance. He wasn't drugged inside.
And walk me through that part of it. You said you heard the gunshots, and then what happened after everything seemed to calm down? That's when the fire erupted.
Yeah, about 5 minutes after the gunfire started, I saw smoke. Then I saw flames coming from the house down the street. And I said, oh, wow, down there's a fire. And that was just even more. By then, everything was blocked off. Neighbors were gathering. Cops was running up and down the street saying, stay in your door, stay in the house. Or at this point, I was on a curve just watching. And they said, got a little cold, and they wouldn't let us back in the house because they didn't know who the shooter was, where the shooter was, and they just wanted us to be safe behind the crime scene tape.
Was there anybody else inside the house with you?
No, I live alone, just myself.
So at this point, looking back, I know it's a silly question, but what's going through your head, with the information you have?
Hopefully, there was a little girl. I hope she's okay. I hope she's safe and everything. I hope everybody got out of the house that needed to get out of the house. I know they're going back in to investigate now and see who did it, if they're still in there or dead or whatever. I don't know.
Let me reshape that one question. Do you know anyone who lives in that house?
I don't know the neighbors because it's a little further down the street from where I live.
Okay. Sean Ferguson, thank you so much. I'm glad you're okay.
No problem, Walter.
So that's where we stand right now, Brian. As you mentioned, still a very active scene, although things have calmed down a bit. We've seen a bunch of fire trucks leaving the area, but it's still cordoned off, so we can't get down there. We can't get too much closer at this point. Once we can and get more information, we'll pass it along to you as well. Reporting live from East Lansdowne, Walter Perez, Channel 6 Action News. Brian?
Yeah, and Walter, if I may, one quick question. I presume the presence of police officers has thinned out pretty significantly at this point?
Yes, I mean, as far as we know, once again, we're at a distance where we can't see exactly how many vehicles were there and how many are there now, but over the past half hour or so, a few police cars left, a tactical vehicle left, a couple of fire trucks left, so it does seem like things are calming down at this point.
Okay. Walter, thank you. You can hear our helicopter in the background. I'm going to take you up there and give you the vantage point from the sky right now. We have been looking at this picture For so long now, a couple of hours, really 2 hours and 22 minutes. Sarah Bloomquist and I were walking into the studio here today to begin what we thought would be a normal 4 o'clock newscast. We got word that this was unfolding in East Lansdowne. As we sat in the chair, we began this journey with you that was just exceptional in so many ways and sad in ways too many to count. As we take a live look at the house right now, this is the picture so many waited so long to see. Fire crews dousing that home with fire, rather with water. They could not do this for so long because of the threat posed by that active shooter inside. As we look at the house, some key questions remain here tonight. What came of that shooter? Was, in fact, there an 11-year-old girl shot inside that, or was that some kind of ruse to draw police upon whom that shooter might fire, and did fire when they arrived? Right now, it is not just fire crews on the scene. It is crime scene investigators who will begin the painstaking process of trying to find any human remains and figuring out what was their role in this awful situation that paralyzed so much of the region this afternoon. Again, potentially an 11-year-old child among the victims of this heinous act carried out by a gunman who then trained his weapon on 2 officers who are, and the good news is this tonight, in the hospital, conscious and alert. We encourage you to head to 6abc.com to get the very latest on this breaking story. Of course, we're going to have every angle covered here and get you reaction and the latest from police as this night continues to unfold. In the meantime, we will do something we've not done in a very long time to get a check on that AccuWeather forecast. Meteorologist Cecily Tyler.
And Brian, thank goodness that it wasn't a windy day.
That's correct.
Or that fire would have spread very quickly.
Absolutely.
Let's go live on Sky 6. Quiet day, made it up to a high of 49 degrees.